Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie Schneiderite, and we have our third appearance for Rutgers basketball insider, Richard Kent. Richard, thank you so much once again for joining us. You have a ton of stuff to talk about here.
My pleasure. I'm even wearing for you my favorite Rutgers sweatshirt. So
love it.
I like it better than the Block R for this reason. I interview for Rutgers at college fairs, and when I have my R on, I've gotten a few people to ask me if it's Radford. So,
oh, geez.
Yeah, I'm done with that.
Well, hopefully, as the brand gets bigger and the Big Ten continues to grow, that'll change for the better. But Rutgers had quite a few things basketball-wise that happened in the past few weeks. So I want to kind of touch base with you on all those. So first, Rutgers got a transfer in Noah Fernandes. He visited 2 weeks ago, and he committed to Rutgers. And do you see him as the starting point guard next year?
I do. He's a tremendous get for Rutgers. And it's my understanding that he came on his visit with his girlfriend. I think he may have a child with his girlfriend, or
he does.
I don't know if that's accurate, but I guess you guys do. And I'm under the understanding that she had a tremendous visit as well. So I would pencil him in. I'm not worried about his size at all. He was injured last year at UMass, but he's a really big time player. And after the Timberlake kid from Towson, I would certainly take Fernandes. I think Timberlake's either going to go to UConn or UNC.
Who was Rutgers' main competition when they landed Fernandes?
Well, we know that he had a visit scheduled at Butler. And we also, well, I don't know if we do, but I'm under the impression that once Derek Kellogg left UMass and went to Creighton, that Creighton started to get involved in the picture. Literally, I think he was at Rutgers on a Friday and a Saturday. Literally, like Thursday or Friday, Creighton got involved. But, Rutgers certainly beat out Butler. We know that.
Was this a guy that Rutgers immediately targeted as one of their top portal targets when he entered the portal?
I can't opine on immediately because I don't know if that's accurate.
Got it.
Yeah, so Rutgers also added another player to the program, not the men's program, but the women's program. I wanted to talk a little bit about Destiny Adams. Obviously, her numbers in high school are phenomenal, NJ Gatorade Player of the Year. But can you talk a little bit about her coming to Rutgers?
Yeah, I think I represent a Big Ten coach, so I reached out to that coach. The coach said to me that she's a really good athlete, not necessarily a really good shooter, but a really good athlete. And Rutgers has historically had a number of really good athletes, not, other than Shawnetta Stewart and Heather Zurich, not a great amount of great shooters. Obviously, Cappy was a great shooter. Obviously, Epiphany Prince was a great shooter. But, this probably falls more into the athlete mode. But I think it's important for another reason. She's from New Jersey, which is huge. And, I was not hearing good stuff about Rutgers on the recruiting trail. So for there to be some buzz created, it's certainly important. Now, I can't hook her up with her brother at all because, they would never even play together. Is my understanding. So I don't really, listen, it was not a package deal between Coquise and Steve Peichel. And I don't know if it has any impact at all on her brother. So I can't even, no matter what the wild speculation is, I can't say that.
Yeah, I know you can't take a 15-year-old's Instagram comment saying, I'm going to go wherever you go to heart, but that is what happened. Now, what are you hearing in regards to her brother? I think you recall, or you told me that another local school's after him as well.
No, I really don't. Yeah, Villanova's certainly involved with her brother. I really don't. I didn't know much about him until I saw that she committed. So I'm no expert on him.
What are you hearing about some of the top targets Rutgers is recruiting, though, from the high school ranks? So Dylan Harper, Tyler Betsey, do you have any new information on where they're leaning, what's going on with their recruitments?
I continue to feel really good about Dylan Harper. I have for a long time. I know his mom is really influential in this thing. Not that his dad isn't, not that his brother isn't, but when everybody talks about the five schools is two schools, Rutgers and Duke. And I know this is imprecise at best, but I would say 60-40 towards Rutgers.
That's kind of the vibe overall, because I mean,
Yeah.
obviously Ace Bailey, their friendship isn't going to decide whether or not he comes here, but it seems like he's going out of his way to spend a lot of time with Ace Bailey, in terms of going to the junior national mini camp in Houston over the Final Four, spending time with his AAU program a week later, and they had a really good tournament wherever they were playing. I think they blew out both teams by 30 plus points, but just feels like more and more leaning towards Rutgers. So I'm glad that what you're hearing is backing that up as well.
It is. And I'm not optimistic on Tyler Betsey. I think that I was in the gym at St. Thomas More when John Shire was there, and he offered him. I mean, I would say that kid's going to go, and he's tremendous, by the way. I would say that kid's going to go to Duke or UConn. He, not only is he a prep school kid in Connecticut, but he's a Connecticut kid. So, I mean, that's really important. So I would not put too many eggs into the Tyler Betsey basket.
Fair enough. So let's move on to the next topic, the main topic, assistant coaching search. Well, what's the latest you're kind of hearing on that? I know everyone wants to talk about Brett McConnell. So is there anything going on there?
Well, I was told by a really good source that Steve Peichel had over 100 text messages within the 24 hours after Carl Hobbs announced that he was departing. And
so his phone still works.
Right.
He didn't smash that phone.
Right.
He got a new one.
And Jay Young is a good friend of mine. He's now the Fairfield coach. And Jay Young himself told me that he had 30 text messages from people wanting to know Steve Peichel's cell phone number, which he doesn't give out. Wow. So, I mean, listen, it's a coveted job. It pays well. Rutgers is in the Big Ten. And it's a little late right now. I mean, we're more than halfway through April. But, two things we need to know about Steve. He's, one, very deliberate, and two, very loyal. So I would be stupefied if this was a left field hire from Wichita or something. Yep. I mean, I would think it's going to be somebody with a UConn connection. I don't know if it's going to be a staff elevation at Rutgers, but that once again would predispose loyalty. And I know you asked me about Brett McConnell. I've had a front seat to. Well, I think I first met him when he was 6 or 8 years old. I went to a baseball game with him and his dad. His dad is obviously pretty renowned at Rutgers. And I think he'd be a tremendous hire on many levels. I know some people say, yeah, but he's at Princeton. Well, Brett is a ferocious recruiter. And he's a ferocious recruiter, not in the Ivy League. Not that should denigrate anybody as a recruiter, but he's known as a ferocious recruiter nationally. And I think we all know the name that I first posted in January on the Rutgers board, Tosan Awoma, when somebody accused me of posting the name of a disease on the Rutgers board. But Tosan Awoma was found 100% by Brett.
Do you think it's realistic that Brett ends up at Rutgers, or has that not seemed as likely as more interest has come in for the position?
I don't think it's realistic that any one person will end up at Rutgers at this juncture. I mean, I know this is a silly comment, but I would think that everybody has a 1 in 100 chance at this point.
Sure.
So I can't say anybody's likely now. Now, I don't know. I never really got great insight as to why Carl Hobbs left. I mean, some people have speculated that it's mutual, but as we just said, Steve is a very loyal guy. He worked for Carl Hobbs at GW, and Steve. Obviously, Steve is a Rutgers guy, but Steve also is, he's a UConn alum, and he knows what the UConn program has done for people. So I don't know if it was mutual or not. I know that Carl Hobbs tried to get involved in some head coaching situations and didn't end up getting them. So I don't know why the move.
So now, is there like a feeling of where Pike kind of wants to go next? Would you think he wants to go with another veteran presence, or do you think he wants to go with that recruiting shark mentality?
You know, that's a great question. I once again, I don't know that I'm competent to answer that. Um, he's got TJ and Knight are both great recruiters. I will say this, and I don't know how much efficacy I can place in this, but one person said that he may end up, and I don't know if this is this position or another position, hiring an NIL general manager like Villanova hired Baker Dunleavy, who was the coach at Quinnipiac.
Hmm.
But I would think if he does that, that would be another position.
I mean, it's clearly kind of needed as Rutgers recruiting has improved. NIL becomes more and more important as more competition is there. And we've seen that kind of recently with one of our commitments in 2023. Sounds like there's a late surge via another school for NIL. Are you hearing anything about Bay Ndongo regarding, people coming in late for him?
Well, the most important thing is he's still committed to Rutgers. He is not
Yep.
decommitted from Rutgers. And I have, once again, I have no firsthand knowledge, but everybody and their sister has told me about Georgetown. So I got to believe that where there's smoke, there's some fire. I actually, I've seen Georgetown mentioned with more people than St. John's at this juncture. And you would have thought that St. John's, since he got rid of his entire roster except for Soriano, would be mentioned. He did get 3 kids already. Obviously, he got the UConn kid and he got 2 Iona kids. But yeah, Georgetown. Listen, Cooley is a tremendous hire, and Cooley has tremendous connections. And you've got right now a cadre of coaches in the Big East. I would say better than any conference in the country.
Yeah, it's been a long time since the Big East has had that much star power at their coaching positions across the board. Obviously, if you look at like the 80s, it's like a who's who of Hall of Fame coaches. It's not that good, but it's still very, very, very good right now.
And I mean, people say, well, Providence is in deep trouble. The person who anointed Kim English at Providence was Billy Donovan.
Wow.
So,
There you
I
go.
mean, Billy Donovan was not only a great Providence player, but he's pretty renowned in the coaching circles now.
Yeah, no kidding. So kind of moving on a little bit, Rutgers has 3 transfers in the portal too. What's the latest on those guys between Jalen Miller, Dean Reiber, and Oskar Palmquist?
Well, I'm pretty certain that Dean Reiber was offered around $70,000 by Youngstown State. You might know that Ben Asher
Wow.
Sheesh.
is at Youngstown State, and I was told that Youngstown State has a $300,000 men's basketball collective, which is a big number, and I don't think that's far off what the Rutgers number is. So, I mean, that just for men's basketball, that is. I was also told that Dean Reiber may go home and go to Charlotte. So I think those are the 2 schools involved for Dean Reiber. Oskar Palmquist apparently is really interested in going to Montana. I know nothing about Montana. Uh,
The Grizz.
Montana as a state or Montana basketball at all.
Yeah, that's and then what about Jalen Miller as well?
I know that Cornell reached out to him.
Mhm.
You know, not a lot of Ivies can dip into the portal. Yale, Harvard, and Princeton don't and can't, probably for a number of reasons. One of which is you got to get your application into the. You can't just all of a sudden go there. But it's my understanding that Penn and Cornell have until April the 30th to utilize the portal. So I do know that Brian Earl, who's at Cornell, was in touch with Jalen Miller.
Interesting.
So we've talked about basketball scheduling a couple times with you. There's obviously an MSG game that's been talked about. Are you hearing any more clarity on what will happen with the Madison Square Garden game this year? Because it sounds like it's going to happen. It's just who the opponent is going to be.
Yeah, it would be a stunner to me if it didn't happen. I've had two people tell me it's could be St. John's. I had one person tell me it's not going to be St. John's. The first time I heard about St. John's was when Mike Anderson was the coach at St. John's. So now we have a new coach at St. John's. But I can't imagine that Rick Pitino is afraid of playing Rutgers at Madison Square Garden. So
No.
I guess it could be St. John's. We continue to hear Gonzaga, but I am confident that it's not going to be the Jimmy V. It's not going to be the CBS Sports Classic. It's going to be a game at Madison Square Garden. I'm relatively certain. I mean, I am certain that Rutgers is not playing in a holiday tournament over Thanksgiving or over Christmas. I did get some hopeful vibes that it'll happen in 2024. And I got some hopeful vibes that Rutgers has talked to the Bahamar in the Bahamas people. So
that would be a great trip for Rutgers fans. I'd love to go on a vacation, see some Rutgers basketball. The best of both worlds there.
Yeah, I'm actually going to the Cayman Islands. I got an invite. I'm friends with the LSU women's coach, Kim Mulkey, and she's going to be down there along with UConn and UCLA in a women's tournament over Thanksgiving, and that should be fun.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
could Rutgers potentially play St. John's in the Gavitt games and have a separate game at MSG?
Of course. I mean, but Rutgers has played St. John's in the Gavitt games before.
Okay.
So
that would eliminate that game from happening again.
It wouldn't eliminate. Rutgers will be in the Gavitt game, and Rutgers will have Gavitt games, and Rutgers will have a RAC game. I'm kind of thinking it wouldn't be St. John's. I'm virtually positive it won't be DePaul again. I'd love it.
Not.
I'd love it to be an upper echelon team. Everybody's dream would be either Villanova or UConn. So we'll see.
Yeah, the Gavitt games is coming to an end soon, right? If I recall correctly.
It hasn't been announced officially, but I do think 2023 is the last one.
Okay. Any ideas why they want to get rid of it? I always thought it was a pretty cool little rivalry.
No idea.
I wonder if it's because the Gavitt games are controlled by like ESPN and the Big Ten's no longer having a relationship with Big Ten.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, in terms of out-of-conference schedules, I know we talked about it off the pod, but I want to talk about it a little bit on the pod. How important is it to get better teams on this out-of-conference schedule?
I think it's really important. I think that it's a tremendous misconception that out-of-conference schedule merges into the conference schedule by way of the selection committee deliberations. It's a separate entity to the extent that you control 100% your out-of-conference schedule. And I mean, I guess one could argue that Rutgers doesn't control the Seton Hall schedule game, the Hardwood Classic, but I think it does. I don't know how much that's Pat Hobbs since he was the AD at Seton Hall, but Rutgers controls who Rutgers plays. And I just think there's better ways to do it for a number of reasons, including the fans in December. I think there's better ways to do it than to play Stonehill and LIU.
Yeah, I think there's some value in having a couple games like that just to get, warmed up, get some younger players on the court. But if it's 8 or 9 games like that versus 3 or 4, it really does kind of drag the whole schedule down. I agree.
Yeah, I think it would be 6. I don't know that it would be 8, but we'll see. I mean, listen, we know there's going to be more. Let's put it this way: we know there's going to be more Stonehills and LIUs.
Yep. Yeah, honestly, it doesn't even matter who they are. Ideally, it's a closer school, so they don't have to pay more for to fly a school in, because there's a lot of money associated with these games to get teams to come basically get their asses kicked at your home court. So I mean,
I like to look just out of idle curiosity at StubHub before Rutgers games, and I'm pretty sure that I saw the Central Connecticut game and a couple of other games, tickets going for $5 to $10 the day before those games. I'm relatively certain that if you had, even, I don't know, I wouldn't even know how to pick a name, but if you had a team in the mid 150s, there'd be some buzz, and those tickets would not be going for that. Yeah,
I think the only school that fit that bill last year was UMass Lowell, who we beat pretty handily. I think we won by like 15 points, and they were like around 140 in Ken Palm when we played them. So yeah, it'd be nice to play more teams like that.
I mean, people talked about Coppin State like they were Duke, but they weren't. I mean, it ended up being Howard ended up being the NCAA selection from that conference.
Yeah, there's so many names. Like I'm just looking through it now. Like why not play a Vermont or who else? I could play Hofstra every year. Like I thought Hofstra is a good little game. I know that's not 150; it's more of like the 200 range, but it's still better than a 320 team or a 310 team you're playing.
Yeah. Isn't there a team that's kind of close by that's about 90 or 100?
Who we talking? Oh, yeah,
are they an Ivy League team?
Yeah. I believe so. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
But there's few things we can guarantee in life, and that's one of them. That's not happening.
Damn.
I think it would be cool to have similar to how obviously the Big Five or the Big Five in Philadelphia's changed now to the Big Six, and they've kind of restructured how they're going to do that whole tournament. It would be cool if New Jersey had something like that every year, where they had a championship game between all six. Is there six Division I basketball programs in the state?
But it's not going to happen.
Yeah. It won't happen, but it'd be a nice idea. It'd be something that everyone in New Jersey could look forward to every year. But
the thing that surprises me about the Big Six, Big Five, Big Six is that it's not at the Palestra. It's at Wells Fargo.
Yeah, that's going to take a lot of the mystique away from it, I feel. Because it's always been at the Palestra. I don't know why, other than making more money, that they're moving it, but money usually wins out.
Making more money.
Yeah, yep. Usually wins out.
Yep.
Tradition be damned.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, the almighty dollar. So now I know we usually talk basketball here, but I want to ask you something about football. So you're hearing some good things, I hear, about a certain Rutgers quarterback commit in AJ SURACE.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked around here, and I'm relatively hooked into the Ivy community, and there's a ton of Ivy League coaches and assistant coaches that say this kid's a real stud on so many levels. Arm strength, football IQ, obviously the quintessential son of a coach. So I think we're going to see that kid, at some point starting at quarterback for Rutgers.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Rutgers hasn't exactly had a ton of great quarterback play over the last decade. I think the last QB that even really showed anything was Gary Nova, and what was that, 2013, 2014? So
yeah.
Doesn't Ray Lucas still have eligibility?
We'll have to ask him. I don't know how much he's got left in his arms or legs at this point, but yeah, he was another great for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So Richie, we've gone through a ton of topics with you, and we really appreciate you joining again. Is there anything else you wanted to hit on that we haven't talked about?
I've heard from some sources, I don't know how good they are, that Papa Conte is maybe not as firmly committed to Michigan as people think. I have no independent verification. I do know about, he was really close, is really close with Gavin Griffiths. I don't know what's going on with him, and it would be a complete wild card if that ever happened. I do know a while ago that I was told that an assistant coach at Pitt, who used to coach at the prep school that he's at right now, was pretty close with him. So I might consider monitoring that situation, and I'm not saying on any level that he's going to Rutgers. I'm just saying that might be a situation worthy of some monitoring.
Interesting. Yeah, because there was some rumors that there was possibly an academic issue with him getting into Michigan around his ESL course, I think it was. So interesting that you're also hearing that he might be not as firmly committed to Michigan as it may seem.
Yeah, I mean, English as a second language is not an academic problem for a kid. It doesn't mean he's not intelligent.
Yep.
Listen, the three of us have spoken English since birth, but I've been told by people trying to learn English that it's one hard language to understand. I mean, just take the word to, TWO, TO, and TOO. It's got three different meanings.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely overlooked at how difficult it is moving to a new country, learning a language at a level that you can learn in college, at a high level college, nonetheless, in Michigan. It's not easy. And I think we kind of overlook that a lot because there's so many foreign kids now that are high level athletes coming in and making an impact. So yeah, it's definitely an overlooked aspect of, we definitely overlook it as English speakers. I agree with you.
And I wanted to add another point. People say that, NIL may be low at Rutgers, may be low at other places. People get NIL from other sources other than collectives. I mean, and I'm not saying this happens at Rutgers, but it's not only through a collective in which people get NIL money. So I have a pretty good handle that the Rutgers NIL collective is not, it's certainly active. It's certainly people have worked their tails off on it, but there's probably not the number there that there is at other places. But NIL does come from other sources other than pure collectives.
Yeah, it seems like the collectives are great for kind of amassing the small time donors, the ones who can give, 100, 1,000, whatever, but not offer, $100,000 NIL deal on their own. So it's nice to kind of like gravitate, the average fan, but not necessarily the super donors.
Yeah, I mean, I think I may have mentioned this on a previous podcast. We had a really good NIL collective event after Rutgers beat Ohio State in basketball at the RAC. We walked over and Steve Peichel talked to the group to the Rutgers Club, which, by the way, if anybody hasn't been there, that's a really great place to have lunch or dinner. And it's literally a 3-minute walk from the RAC. And, people really, I have a handle on some of the numbers. People really stepped up at that event.
I believe right after that game, a certain 5-star player committed as well. I'm sure that's just a coincidence.
Ace Bailey committed in the locker room after the game, but it has nothing to do with the event that took place at the Rutgers Club. As a matter of fact, and obviously Steve couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
But somebody else did raise it. I didn't even know it until I got to the Rutgers Club and until somebody said it. I had no idea.
The craziest story about that is I remember after the game, some national college football recruiter, recruiting expert, said sources are telling me that Ace Bailey has committed to Rutgers. So none of the local guys had it first. It was some random national guy, and then it slowly spread across the press room that Ace Bailey committed, and just totally blew up on social media.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Brian Fonseca was still in the building.
Yeah.
When Ace Bailey was in the building, when Ace Bailey went into the locker room and walked out, because I did communicate with Brian that night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Craig Epstein was in the press room, and we have a group chat at the Night Report, and we had texted Chris about it, and he told the entire press room. So that's kind of how the press room found out.
Yeah.
Okay. But Brian Fonseca, by the way, is really good. And he's really, obviously Jerry Carino is the dean of all this stuff. But Brian's really good. His focus is Rutgers only.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Richie. Well, we really appreciate you joining us once again. Everybody who's tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. This has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.